Hi, Uku.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Welcome to the Payments Show.
Well, nice to be here. Glad to be here.
Great to have you on. I thought you'd be Estonian.
I am actually Estonian. I just have a slight knack for languages, hence why I quite often don't sound as an Estonian.
Initially, I thought you were from the UK somewhere.
Yes, most tend to think that. Sometimes because I have a slightly reddish tinge in my hair, I am sometimes presumed to be Irish.
That's exactly
However, I
what
am not.
I thought you were either Irish or Scottish. Yeah.
Yep. That's what most people assume, but no. Actually, I'm not. I am fully Estonian.
Good stuff. I find it cool to meet different people from all parts of the world on the show. It's great. I'll start by giving you a quick intro. You're the CEO of Messente, which
Yes.
is a dedicated business messaging platform.
Yes.
And in summary, it enables businesses to do things like send one-time passwords, PIN codes, notifications and verifications to customers securely and at scale, being the key thing.
Yep.
And it comes across pretty strongly that security is quite a key part of your solution.
Yes.
So we'll definitely get into that. I thought it'd be good to start by setting the stage. Although we're all using messaging systems like WhatsApp, etc., the SMS is still huge. I got some stats that around 36 billion SMSs are sent in the UK every year. So that's from the website Statista. So it's a huge amount of volume, even though the volume's gone down massively in the last 10 or so years. Would it be fair to say that pretty much most SMSs now are for receiving from companies? I mean, I haven't
Yeah.
sent an SMS for a long time.
P2P, so peer to peer or pretty much between people, is kind of dead, but A to P is growing at a very rapid rate. The expected growth up to 2027 is plus 70% in growth, simply because there's no other communication channel that's this ubiquitous. If you have a phone, you can get a text message, right? And it's a pretty simple solution. People are very used to sort of receiving messages. Most these days expect to get a text message or a notification. People are used to OTPs, etc. And the reason why we've sort of landed on that security and fraud angle as much as we have is because with the rise of AI and with everything becoming more digital and more businesses using SMS, fraud is becoming bigger and badder and more converting as well. And as a background, why we talk so much about security is like in Estonia, we're the market leader. And one other thing that comes along with it for us is we work with the Estonian police, the Estonian authorities, the Estonian Banking Association, actually actively filtering out fraud, actually actively fighting against it. And then we're seeing also the development, especially the rapid increase in scam quality over the last few years, which has created this also a pretty large increase in the conversion from scams as well, which means that more people actually click the links and more people lose money, and that the numbers that people can lose are quite astronomical due to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm going to be a bit of a devil's advocate here. Let's talk about the benefits of this solution to businesses.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, SMS verification. You've got, I think, Viber for business messages. I don't know whether that's
WhatsApp.
relevant in the UK and Europe, but I think Viber was big in Asia, or am I wrong there?
It's relevant in Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria, Poland, Lithuania, Slovakia, that area of Europe. I mean, RCS is probably more relevant in the UK, so Rich Communication Service, which is kind of like WhatsApp via SMS on Android, basically. So that's more relevant in the UK, and WhatsApp potentially is more relevant in the UK, what we also do.
Okay. And then in terms of the specifics for end users in this payments and e-commerce context, customers can receive notifications, critical reminders, receipts and tickets and things like that, promotions, and then obviously back to the two-factor authentication and fraud prevention. So they're the main benefits for consumers, obviously.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I mean, I can think of scenarios, for example, when I travel, if I'm going anywhere for more than 2 weeks, I'll just get a local SIM. So it causes a bit of a problem there. And I prefer to have in-app approvals or things like that. But I'm sure you've got some stats that show that that's a very small minority I mean, that scenario, but there could be others as well. So it'd be good to get your take on how you prevent, say, a massive amount of fraud with the solution versus dealing with a few edge cases.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. The question of roaming has been around quite often as well. The good thing about SMS is that to receive, like getting roaming calls, especially depending on who your provider is. Like in the EU, it's super easy because for most operators, EU rules, you get a fair bit of data, the calls are pretty reasonable, texts are pretty reasonable. Go somewhere else, go to like South Africa, it's going to be significantly more expensive, right? So most usually people don't want to hold their data on, and that's why they either get a roaming SIM to do some calls, do stuff like that. But most usually for purely like text messaging purposes, not for calls are more expensive, but purely for text messaging purposes, one text is usually still quite cheap. Even if it's like 2, 3, maybe 10x compared to what you pay locally, you're still paying like 20 cents, 30 cents. It's not that hugely expensive. So for those purposes, SMS is usually even usable even in roaming circumstances as compared to like having calls or doing data. If I go for a longer distance as well, I usually carry a roaming router. So I'll use data via my own roaming router and then do, calls and texts via the phone. So I'll play around with that. But yeah, it is a thing, though. Unfortunately, most people don't travel abroad for too long of a period of time, nor too often for it to be a too big of a detractor compared to the benefits.
Yeah, that is true, to be fair. I'm the exception.
But
of travel sort of more. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. You cover a lot of industries. Mm-hmm. So e-commerce goes without saying, and things like parcel delivery for notifications is ideal. But you've also got some other interesting ones. So healthcare, hospitality, and financial services. Mm-hmm. It'd be sort of great to understand where you're seeing the more demand versus less, and maybe some case studies as well, where you can sort of illustrate the benefits, pre and post implementing your solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually quite easy to do, mainly because we just cooked up a few fresh case studies, so I can say exactly how it works. But financial services, actually, interestingly enough, are the biggest users of SMS by far out of everyone, because it's the 2FA logins, then it's the payment notifications when you're overdue, then it's the notifications about logins. Some do, you pay in a different currency. My home bank lets me know what was the actual charge with the currency taken into consideration. They send some offers, some notifications, reminders, appointments, stuff like that. So banks actually use messaging a lot, and they're also the biggest targets of scam as well. Hence why usually the fraud angle also resonates with them the most. Like financial services are the biggest part of our portfolio as well, like banks and apps, and even to that extent where, to a degree, we even work with major brands like HSBC, with their like side projects in a way, not their main traffic, but with their side projects specifically because of certain values that we carry as compared to somebody who just does bulk for them for like marketing and stuff.
Yeah, excellent. So financial services the biggest. And then would you say things like e-commerce and parcel delivery are the next biggest?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
those are the next biggest after that. And then we followed quite closely by healthcare, mainly because actually, especially after the onset of COVID, what happened was that a lot of the sort of transactions, or not transactions, but let's say the visits we do with doctors went from physical to online. And with them came quite a lot of different platforms that would offer those services. And those platforms would usually come in with logins and reminders that you had a doctor's appointment. So one of the biggest platforms that we used to service that just outgrew us realistically was Doc Planner. That's one of the biggest platforms for doctor's appointment and appointment booking pretty much across the world. And they were up to the level of sending 7, 8, 9, 10 million text messages every single month, just one company, in terms of like pure volume of how many they had. So hospitality is probably the smallest after them, but healthcare does have quite a large portion as well. But hospitality is, your booking reminders, your details on where you'll get the keys, etc., etc. So it's varying degrees of usability as well. If Airbnb and Booking sent you an SMS every single time you booked something, it would probably be bigger in terms of that than it is right now, but they prefer their own apps and email-based services.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. SMS is absolutely the main thing of your solution, but does it encapsulate any other types of messaging, such as messaging through WhatsApp or Telegram or iMessage or anything like
It
that? Or is
does.
that coming in future?
No, it
Oh,
is totally.
okay.
Like, let's say markets like Saudi Arabia, for example, just out of interest, is for us WhatsApp first, where we actually do most, like including OTPs and other payment reminders and stuff like that, go WhatsApp first because it's the dominant messaging channel there. And rich communication just provides a better customer experience, and the conversion rates are bigger as well. Bulgaria and Vietnam both are countries where most of the clients that we have that do promotional content go Viber first, even if the market penetration is only 40%, because conversion on they did a head-to-head SMS versus Viber, right? The actual conversion rate on Viber was 3 times higher, pure conversion 3 times higher compared to SMS, which just shows how much more effective that channel is. And then we combine them into what we call cascading. So let's say that you know that in Pakistan, for example, WhatsApp is by far the biggest thing. It has like 70-80% market penetration. So you'll go WhatsApp first. If it doesn't arrive via WhatsApp, you'll cascade over SMS so it still gets there. So SMS is kind of the last line of defense for communication, but rich channels offer just more value, more bang for your buck these days for just purely creating a more engaging experience for the customer. So it is looking to be the future of messaging.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you've got the cascading thing. That's something I didn't even think of. You've got absolute guarantee, or as much as you can, guarantee of delivery. Yes. Yeah, I mean, the first business message I had outside of SMS was WhatsApp Business. Mm-hmm. That was a few years ago. And then I got one recently when I was in Italy, buying train tickets. The Train Italia send confirmations over WhatsApp, and you can select Telegram as well on their kiosks if you want. So that was quite impressive. I think the UK rail network can learn a bit from them.
Yeah. I mean, UK is pushing RCS quite a lot because probably the others don't have as much penetration, and UK has been one of the leading ones on RCS, and the idea being that you could get the same thing that you got as an experience over WhatsApp, but you could get it without needing to download an app or create an account, which as a theory is absolutely wonderful. The big downside is it's being mainly championed and developed by mobile network operators who historically aren't the fastest or the best at launching new tech or agreeing amongst themselves how that tech should work. Luckily, right now, Google is taking the lead on pushing RCS or RBM or whatever acronym they used on this particular day. And they're actually taking the lead and actually building this thing into a more effective form and making it better and creating this sort of more resonance from that. So that's something that we're very much looking forward to, and something that interests us quite a lot because it's bringing a more unique experience to people, but it also works from the trust side as well, because with like RCS, the same way as it was with your WhatsApp experience as well, the header is, the company logo. You get a tick mark. You get to look at the company's profile. It's significantly more trustworthy. People are willing to then sort of engage with that content a lot more because it's more trustworthy.
Yeah, agreed. That's interesting. I thought it was actually Google that developed RCS as a competitor to iMessage. So it's interesting you're saying it's the mobile phone companies that initially came up with it.
RCS is more than 10 years old. It's like 15 years old now.
Right.
It's literally that old. It has been around since forever. Google picked it up and started developing it more. They're sort of they created RBM and the development into Android. But the core idea of RCS and bringing a second level into this, it has its roots kind of in MMS that used to be a thing as well, but that people really don't use. So it's been here for a really long time, and that's why it's kind of unfortunate as well, because there was an opportunity to create the rich channel and make it a part of everyday work for people and for business communication way back, in early 2000s maybe, but kind of fumbled it unfortunately, at that point.
I just had a thought when BlackBerry was in meltdown, maybe all of the telcos should have bought their BBM Messenger intellectual property.
Would have been a smart move, right?
It
Like,
had a great
and that's
network, didn't it?
yeah, it did. It had a great network and it had a lot of tools, and there are so many other sort of great tools and providers out there. And instead of now us moving towards a future where there's another channel just as ubiquitous as SMS that everybody can use but is rich, instead of that, we are moving very heavily towards a fragmented market where for iPhone users, you're going to have to use iMessage. For RCS dominated countries, you're going to use RCS. Where WhatsApp's dominant, you'll use WhatsApp. Where Viber's dominant, you'll use Viber. So, which of course complicates things for businesses as well, because you need to now manage that through a central like inbox. You have to manage all of the channels, all the different payment levels, registering, etc., etc., etc. There's so much complexity in there. I mean, it's great for us because it means we have problems to solve, and you get to charge money for solving problems, right? But for the end user and for businesses, in terms of actual having more usage for business messaging as well, it's not a positive thing, especially taking into consideration that only 5% of businesses globally use business messaging today. While it's such a good channel, people aren't using it. And if we make it more complicated, even less people are going to use it. So
Yeah.
I would rather vote for making it more simple, but unfortunately, we're still in the minority.
Yeah. One thing I'd really like to dig into, given the premise of the show is around increasing sales conversions and revenues, would love for you to dig into that, especially when you said earlier that Viber in certain EU countries converts more.
Yeah.
And then talking about how even businesses that don't have anything like this at all could even just implement something simple like digital receipts or something. I don't know. How do you think would be the best way to proceed with your solution if somebody just doesn't have anything?
So I guess one of the best ways to go forward with it is ask for advice. What could I implement? What should I implement? Because there's so many varied use cases. For example, one of the things that has probably the highest conversion rate, like pure conversion rate, out of all of the forms of messaging, is dropped cart notifications. So, you're an e-commerce platform, somebody fills their cart up but actually never purchases. If you then, after a period of X, then trigger a text message with a coupon or a code or some form of promo, especially like a dollar discount, for example, then you'll have up to 17% conversion from just that. And SMS also has probably one of the highest click-through rates out of any other channel. The average click-through rate is between 19 and 45% comparatively. If you do compare it to Google Ads, then Google Ads says it's between 2 and 4, roughly. Usually the average is 3%. So, 19 to 45 versus 3. Right? And then if you take another step forward and actually consider cost per click that is immediately associated with that, and cost per click with Google's own estimate is between $2 and $4 per click. But if you then do the comparative of, if you have 19 to 45% CTR, and then if you multiply that by the average global SMS price, which is 6 cents, then what you get is a cost per click of 20 cents to like 50 to 60 cents. So it's significantly cheaper and simultaneously significantly more effective, right? If you're looking to just purely boost your business, try it out. Just try it for a promotional campaign. Try it for a reminder. Reminders are really good as well. Try it for dropped cart notifications, dormant users. Offering something or doing a quick text message with a URL in there is actually quite simple to do, especially if you have the contact base as well. And interestingly enough, I mean, this is one of the things you shouldn't talk about too loudly, but the information is out there, so it's probably fair enough to talk about it. 70% of people unsubscribe from text messages from businesses because they send too many text messages. 16% opt out because they didn't ask for them in the first place. I would have assumed that most people sort of get pissed or opt out because they didn't ask for them in the first place, but that's actually a minority. It's one of the smallest reasons why people would opt out of any marketing communication is because they didn't opt in the first place.
I personally am astounded that when you sign up for most just simple email newsletters, the frequency isn't there as an option. There are a ton of newsletters that I unsubscribe to, not because I don't want to hear from these people. It's just that I want to hear from them once every 6 months or once a quarter, but you can't do that. It's either you get smashed by an email workflow when you sign up, and then you just unsubscribe because it's too much, or even once a month for certain things. If I just bought a whole bunch of clothes, I don't need offers, every week for the next 52 weeks because I'm going to be okay for a while. So I can totally understand that from an SMS perspective, and it's even worse because it's so personal and you put a higher priority on it. You don't want to abuse that channel. Do you have things in place on the platform which prevents that?
So, honest answer, no. Clients control how much they send. What we do have is we have things like flood filters and spam filters to make sure that not too many messages are sent to a single number. But because we don't know what the intent of both the end customer receiving the message and the intent of the business is, then usually the obligation is on the customer side or our customer side to know how many messages to send. So no, not from that angle. But what we do is we advise them a lot, especially when we're seeing, you're sending 36 marketing campaigns into a small country every single day. Might want to tone it down. Here's what the optimum is. Optimum is like 1 to 2 times per month max, and then you're talking about a product that isn't like expensive. You're not going to buy a new winter coat every month. You want to do a winter coat promo, do it in like October, November. There you could do 4. You could probably do it once every week if you really, really want to. And it probably isn't too grating, especially if you increase the amount of discount you're giving or whatever. But you really, really need to understand that compared to email, SMS is a much more invasive channel. So you need to take that into consideration when you're building those marketing flows up, and then we try to advise companies based on that as well. But we don't block sending. Mainly because usually if we block something, we get shouted at more than if we don't block something.
Yeah. I'm assuming you do enable with every message that's sent, do you tell your customers, well, you have to have an unsubscribe link?
Yeah. We also provide the necessary blacklisting tool set and everything else to actually, so you would be able to create the webhooks, manage the blacklist, manage the phone book to make sure that you're doing so compliantly. Because it is a major part of the business as well to ensure that the channel stays safe. It's not just, the business getting maximum impact from it, but we also need to ensure that this channel is still here, 5 years from now, because this is our business. It's the same reason why we do all of this anti-fraud work, because it's not so much to just make a lot of money and, to increase our EBITDA, but rather I need this channel to be clean and usable 5 years down the line as well.
Yeah,
because of my business. I want it to be here. I don't want to, start doing something else 5 years from now because SMS is dead.
Yeah. How long has your company been going, and when were you founded?
We actually had our 10-year anniversary in February.
Good decade behind you. Fantastic.
Yeah, good day. It's been a good growth as well because Messente has been profitable since day one, bootstrapped. We don't owe anybody. We haven't taken any loans. We have our own cash, our own capital, which also means that we don't have to lay off like 20% of people. We're hiring, we're profitable, nice, solid growth trend, like 50% last year or so. Good.
And you're not going to get Slack like Reddit for overcharging for API access.
No, not an issue. Also, like one of the interesting things that we are seeing, and one of the things we tongue-in-cheek kind of advocated within the sort of the working group or the organizations where a lot of aggregators are in, is we've said, WhatsApp pricing is public. Viber pricing is public as well. If I'm going to put a margin on top, you know exactly what my margin is there, right? We advocated, but let's do the same thing on SMS side. It's been really good in places like Norway, where the biggest operator, Telenor, has made their price public because the client knows what they're getting, what the actual price is, so they know what they should be paying. And then anything I put on top, I have to justify. We have no business or no problem in this business actually providing value and showing how we can bring value to clients. But we quite often get into like price wars because no one knows what the actual price is. So if somebody comes and offers 50% lower, you're going to, why am I paying you so much? And then explaining the nuances of the business, etc. I would love it to be transparent and most people to know how much something costs because it makes business about value, not about price.
Yeah. I'm assuming you charge per message or per certain number of block of messages.
Yeah. We usually sort of charge per message and, varying degrees of what the price happens to be within the market, because in the global market, it can be from a half of a tenth of a cent in Colombia to 35 cents in Russia. So the difference is quite large.
Yeah, huge difference.
The spread is immense. That's why some companies are very confused. Why am I paying 10,000 euros for 100,000 messages in one country and 100 euros in another country for the same amount? Well, that's business. Ask the operators. I really can't tell you why they've done that. I mean, from 2020 to 2022, the global messaging cost, average message price, went from 3 cents to 6 cents. MNOs raised prices by 236 operators around the world raised prices by more than 100%. Why? Because they could. And with like people traveling less, they were making less from roaming, so they needed to make their money back, and A2P SMS seemed like a great place to make that money back, right? But it opens up a discussion of what's the amount per message I'm paying as compared to what's the value I'm getting from the platform, which you start getting into price wars where somebody's willing to do it with 5%, even up to the point where these days there are providers that will not send out, let's say, 5% of a marketing campaign. Still charge you for it, but not send 5% out. So they could essentially sell the product at cost and make 5% profit. You're getting a poorer service, but if you look at the actual average conversion rates, etc., maybe it only influences your conversion rate, that 5% or less messages sent out. Maybe it only influences by 0.3. And then you don't notice that 0.3. But that 0.3 still hurts. And that's the unfortunate circumstance you sometimes find yourself in when, this price is instead of value. But yes, we charge per SMS. And then certain products like Verigator, that's a more complicated sort of product, that's more of an out-of-the-box solution for businesses to launch immediately globally if their verification services, then those usually come with monthly fees as well, especially for the setup, which is complicated for each client separately, and then a monthly fee. But usually we work with companies on their own brands per message cost, period.
Do you want to touch on that black box solution? Sorry, it's called Verigator. Is that right?
Yeah, Verigator. Sure. Verigator is a nice little tool because most of the time, if you were a global business and you wanted to talk about a case study, so I'll give you a nice case study. So we have a client that's a verification service that is now in a unicorn in Estonia as well, and they send messages to 197 countries in the world. And when you launch a business in 20, 30, 40, 50, 190 countries in the world, what's going to happen is that a lot of countries have a lot of red tape before you're able to send text messages. Quite easy in the UK, sign up to a platform, start sending tomorrow. Not so in Saudi Arabia or UAE, where the process can take 3 to 6 months. So you can't launch your business simultaneously in a lot of markets around the world. So what we did was that we built a specific service that we registered ourselves already globally, did all of the pre-work around it that was necessary. Also registered it on Viber and registered it on WhatsApp so you could build cascades with it as well. And created like an OTP sending service where you could launch globally. And what we did for that same business was that they wanted to do 197 markets at a time. It's like, fine, let's go. But let's go Verigator first. You want to do OTPs first? Let's do OTPs first. I can launch them tomorrow. And with a lot of businesses that come to us that want to start using either us or want to start using our solutions, we'll recommend, let's get going with your transactional stuff with Verigator first. And then we'll have time to create branded templates and create your branded sender IDs and your own agents on RCS and WhatsApp and Viber, creating all of those nuances that usually take, a ton of time, ton of paperwork, going back and forth. Let us handle that in the background while your business gets to grow and you get to send those messages and do those things simultaneously. So that's why we built Verigator. And it's been so far like a vehicle to get things moving faster across multiple channels across the globe.
Great. I was going to ask you how many countries you operate in, but clearly it's everywhere.
Yes, literally everywhere. We're a European focused company in the sense that most of the companies we work with are European. But what quite often happens is, like, I'll take an example from Estonia. Estonia is a small market and you can't really grow your business into the billions in just Estonia. You can't. There's 1.3 million people. You're not going to grow very far. So what you do is you launch a business in Estonia and then you maybe expand into Poland. You do your business in Poland. You want to expand somewhere else. You go into Spain. And then since you're already in Spain, you'll expand into Brazil as well. But from a messaging perspective, it means, in Estonia, you'll send 10,000 messages, go to Poland, 100,000 messages, Spain, 500,000, Brazil, 6 million. Because just the number of population and the activity and everything else you're doing and the nuances in communication as well mean that as soon as you go into another market, it sort of goes like this. So while a lot of businesses are European, our biggest volume countries are in the Latin American markets like Brazil and Mexico and Colombia are by far the biggest, purely because more people means more text messages, more clients per se as well. And now, with Vietnam being big, Indonesia being big, Philippines being big, having business in pretty much all of the African countries, having business in places like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, UAE. So we're a truly global company, but most of the businesses we work with tend to be European.
Yeah. And you've got a mix of everything from small business all the way up to enterprise. What's the kind of mix?
So we have, and this is, how businesses usually find us, is you're either a smaller business that just wants to send messages, then there's the self-serve platform that you can just sign up to, create an account, send messages. You're 100 message per month sending local grocer. Go right ahead, do your campaigns. Then there's the SMBs that are doing a few markets at a time. Maybe it's a part of an e-commerce platform that's like local, something like that, up to working with major brands, major logistics providers, working with, major parcel locker delivery providers in like 45 countries, working with unicorns in 197 banks across whole sort of ecosystems, etc. So it's a mix of everything. And the good thing about it is sometimes we get to take what we learn from working with enterprises, working with banks, especially like on the fraud side, but even on the customer experience side, and then create templates for efficiency on the self-serve side. So the small guys whose hand we're not going to always be there to hold, we can still help them do better business. Like, use the channel better, here's a template, here's a way to do it, etc.
Excellent. And you're the founder and CEO, right?
I'm not the founder. I am the
okay.
CEO. I've been in Messente, out of the 10 years I've been here, for 7. And I started off as like a junior salesperson. I was an SDR. And I worked my way up from that position through 7 years to now being the CEO and shareholder. So I am a shareholder. I'm not a founder.
Great. Because you had an interesting career. You've been a teacher, you've been a military platoon commander and CEO. Yeah. So it's a really interesting path there.
Yeah, there's been a fair bunch of things that has happened. I mean, I've sold wholesale seafood. I've sold almonds in a medieval cart in the middle of Old Town Tallinn. I've done a bunch of stuff, but it's always helped me towards being the person I am. Like, my military experience is probably one of the things that makes me the leader I am today. The processes, the ability to take the responsibility, etc.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything you wanted to get across that's quite important, which I've missed?
Probably one of the things that, since there's probably people listening here that are either from the payment scene or people that are just usual users as well, maybe one of the things that I want to point out that's super important is that a scam in terms of messaging is happening more and more often, and it's getting better in quality. We're talking about AI and ChatGPT and everything else quite a lot. The ones using it the best are the scammers. We're seeing scam content come in with personalization with your first name, with a URL personalized. It's becoming so much more oriented towards being very, very effective. And we can see it in the conversions as well, that it's very important for businesses to clearly communicate to their clients how they'll communicate, what to expect and what to avoid. And for people themselves to be very, very cautious and very aware about what do you click, what are you looking at, is it legitimate? Our attention spans are getting slower, so if we see something, we go, oh my god, I forgot to pay an invoice. Click, I'll put my credit card details in. There you go, you've lost 2, 3, 4K in an instant. So
and that's always the way, when you're under time pressure, or there's always when you're under stress where you might we all have checks and balances. Yep. Maybe us in tech, we have more than most, but everyone can get fooled sometime.
Yeah. Fully agree.
It's going to be a cat and mouse game for many years, I think, unless more stringent verification and things come in for AI services.
Yeah.
Which I suppose they will do it. I mean, when some of the political images started coming out a few months ago, Microsoft shut down access to some of their services for that. So I think we'll just see more of that, really.
I'm hoping so. It's just it's a constant cat and mouse game where fraud is always going to be out there, but it's a question of how much we can do to curb it and curb the damage, and what's the acceptable threshold of it. It's going to reach a threshold where we'll just go, okay, we're not optimizing the last 5%, right? But right now, the increase has been so substantial and the quality has gotten so good that the damage is increasing. So, and it's just not going to be a one-size-fit-all solution. Banks come up with a solution, not going to fit. One aggregator comes up with a solution. It's not going to be, we're not going to fix the world, unfortunately, even if we want to. The MNOs themselves alone are not going to be the solution to everything. So it's a question of all of the pieces working together, advocating for more awareness, more information, more guidelines on how to work, how not to work, and regulators stepping in as well and putting in measures to make sure that this thing doesn't get out of hand and doesn't get worse.
Some kind of hardware authentication would be more and more important over time. I know the industry is doing a lot to do that, but it takes time.
Yeah. I think so as well. I think there's a lot of possibility for hardware authentication, even things like subscriber verification as well. So subscriber data is one of the things that I've been talking about. So not just verifying whether you have the SIM card in your phone that correlates that phone number, but rather, okay, so in the last 6 months, have you made X amount of phone calls, used X amount? Are you a real person behind it? Are you a real subscriber? So we're seeing that going to be it's probably going to be a big thing in the future. Right now, though, that is a whole other privacy genie in a box that nobody wants to open. Data about your device and what you're storing. Huawei just got hit with bans in very many countries specifically because they were gathering a bit too much data about you. So the mobile network operators also know a lot about you. So them being able to monetize it, sell it for some sort of purposes, I probably think it's going to be a while until that's going to happen.
Well, they would just have to analyze behavioral data themselves and not necessarily sell it. Because they've got the data anyway. Yeah. It would make sense for them to simply analyze the behavior and compare it against a baseline.
Yeah, it would. But then, of course, it raises the question, should a mobile network operator be permitted to do that type of invasive processing, into that data and actually analyzing and creating profiles about people? Are they enough of an authority to create that sort of a database where usually that type of behavior information is reserved only for national institutions like the police, for example, when you've actually done something malicious and then your actions are put into some sort of a database, etc. So it's a lot of these questions around AI and data and device information, etc. is treading on a whole new legal territory as well in terms of where to regulate, how much is proportional to what the gain from that is. We're preventing fraud, making sure that people don't get hit with it, but simultaneously spying on them at the same time. So how do you keep that balance between those two? I think that's a difficult question to answer today.
Yeah, I think that's a good good way to move into what your plans are for the future and what's coming up with Messente in the next 6 to 12 months. And good point to also say your website is messente.com. That's MESSENTE.com. So yeah, next 6 to 12 months, predictions, what's happening, what you're launching.
Two big things. One of them is the constant development of rich messaging. We talked about it at the start of this as well, talking about advancing that, making more tools to make rich messaging for companies easier, making sure that they can launch as much and as very varied forms as possible, and advocating for that. So that's a big thing. So launching new tool sets and new parts related to that to make it more effective. But then, of course, what's more near and dear to my heart personally is everything related to the fraud. So right now we're working on a new project with the Estonian Banking Association, the police and the authorities here to dramatically curb the amount of scam that happens on the Estonian market. And then in the next 6 to 12 months, seeing how well can we apply it to the next markets? How can we apply it to the Baltics, to Scandinavia, then to the UK? How can we take the expertise from these markets and then apply them to more places? With the end goal being, of course, us being the ones doing this, the trust, the products itself that come with it, financial benefit for us, obviously. But from the other side, long-term benefit for the business and the actual industry as a whole, to make sure that we still have a business 5 years down the line. That's what's the big plan for the next 6 to 12 months.
You must have some interesting meetings with the authorities and some cool security clearances.
I do. They're actually quite interesting. There have been rooms in the past couple of months that I've gotten to be in that I never thought I would be in a positive setting. It can always happen in a negative setting, but I wouldn't assume that would be having those conversations with those people in those rooms where they're asking me for advice, essentially, which is a very nice change of pace.
We might see you in a James Bond suit one day.
Maybe.
Excellent.
I don't know if James Bond will be ginger, though. So
you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I do wish you all the best in future and your growth plans. It sounds like there's a lot happening, so good luck. And as a final sort of fun question to end on, given your military background, I'm going to ask you for some fitness tips or hacks that you've got I think could be very relevant.
Oh, I have a really boring one. So persistence is the absolute key, no matter how much you do. An example of me today was day 1021 in a row of doing yoga absolutely every morning. And that doesn't mean that I'll do an hour. It means sometimes I'll do 5 minutes, but I will do it. What's the smallest amount that you can do? Maybe it's three squats. Maybe it's 2 push-ups. Maybe it's half a push-up. What's the smallest thing you could do every day to go forward in terms of your physical fitness, activity, whatever, and then just do it over and over and over and over again. And that way, the results will always be there because you're just doing it all the time. And, trust me, you do half a push-up, 2 days from now, maybe you'll do a full push-up. And then 2 years from now, you'll be doing 60, 70 and looking jacked. So it's all about consistent, persistent work with just the small instances of success.
Great advice. And I think it applies to anything in life, isn't it? Whether you're learning something or doing whatever. Yeah. So great. Thank you so much. All the best. And we'll catch up again in future sometime.
Same to you. Have a great one.
Thanks.